Hello and welcome to the Weekly Watch. This is episode 2. I'm wearing this hat again because I don't know what to do with my hair most of the time. So, yeah. This week I watched Solaris, Green Room, Mean Streets, Inside Llewyn Davis, and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Quite a couple less than last week, which I think is for the best because that means I don't have to cram as much information as I did last time. Or, hey, information, So, without further ado, let's just hop right into it. I'll talk about Mean Streets first. I don't really have that much to say about it, which is why it's one of the first ones I'm talking about. It is a Martin Scorsese film, stars Robert De Niro, and someone else. I can't remember his name. Harvey Keitel. Can't believe I forgot that. It stars them, and it's kind of mostly about their kind of relationship. Harvey Keitel's character is very protective of Robert De Niro's character, Johnny Boy, and they just do random adventure kind of stuff. Random crime gangster adventure kind of stuff. There's not a tight plot to it. It's much more just kind of following the characters around. The acting from Robert De Niro and Harvey Keitel is superb and really high up there. And it's what makes the movie really enjoyable for me because, again, there's not much of a solid plot that's going on. It's much more about the characters and their interactions and how they play off of each other, which is excellent. All the characters are really likable. Even if they're terrible people, they are enjoyable to watch. There's something enjoyable about watching these people. It's a little bit of a kind of classic Greek tragedy in a way. Starts off a little lighthearted and fun, but eventually takes a darker twist as the movie goes on. The other film that I watched was Solaris. That's another one that I just kind of want to get out of the way. I'm going to be honest, I liked Solaris. I liked it a lot, but I don't really have much to talk about with it. And I didn't like it as much as I was really hoping I would. This is the original from 1973. It is a Russian film by Andrei Tarkovsky. And I loved Andrei Tarkovsky's other film that I watched, Stalker, one of my favorite movies ever, and it blew my mind away and really drew me in and was just really meditative and interesting. I didn't like Solaris as much. Solaris was kind of his response to 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. Andrei Tarkovsky didn't like how clean and borderline unemotional 2001: A Space Odyssey was. I personally love 2001: A Space Odyssey. I love it to bits. Top 10 favorite films ever. Really, really like 2001: A Space Odyssey a lot. So maybe that has something to do with me not vibing with Solaris as much, because I was expecting something a little bit more closer to 2001, or would prefer something that was more like 2001. But Solaris is a much more human drama as opposed to what 2001: A Space Odyssey does, which is try to grab the awe-inspiring, imagination-whirling, insane vastness that is space. Solaris doesn't focus on any of that. It is much more about how that affects people. And we don't get that, we get what the people get, essentially. There's 4 scenes where they look out onto the planet Solaris from their space station, and you don't really see much, and not much really seems to happen with it. Almost entirety of the film is these characters interacting with each other and going kind of crazy. The main character, whose name is like Kyle or something. No, Kelvin. Chris Kelvin. I don't know where I got Kyle. I guess the K. His wife literally manifests on board, and everyone else can see his wife and touch his wife. And his wife has been dead for like a decade. So it's about him kind of like being really freaked out about that and trying to figure out what's going on and why that specifically is what Solaris, the planet, chose to tell him. And that's something that I don't really get, is I didn't get the vibe that there was necessarily like life on Solaris. It was more like the planet itself was speaking to the characters. They didn't really define what the weird space stuff was doing or what it was. In 2001 A Space Odyssey, it's very clear that that's not just like space talking to people. That is some sort of alien thing. It's this weird alien thing that we don't know anything about. But it manages to explain just enough, or at least make just enough about it tangible, that it's more engaging for me personally. I really, really wanted to like Solaris a lot more, but I didn't quite vibe. First movie I'm going to talk about is going to be Green Room, I think. That's going to be the first one of the main three of this week, is Green Room. Because I loved Green Room to bits. It is stupidly intense, and I was like on the edge of my seat throughout most of the film's runtime once it gets going. The way they manage to draw you in is very well done. The entire cast is great. It's got Anton Yelchin, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago and was way too young. And it also stars Patrick Stewart. And many other names that you recognize. The girl from not Parks and Rec, Arrested Development. She's in it, as well as the like second guitarist, one of the guitarists of the band, of the main band that the main character is in. The film is about this punk rock band who, and they're like hard punk, who have no money to their name and are desperately trying to make money and find a gig and just kind of try to get their name out there a little bit. And they managed to get this gig at a white supremacist bar. And Patrick Stewart plays the lead white supremacist. And they get stuck in there, and they kind of, because well, I'll go ahead and spoil this. It's not much of a spoiler. They witness a murder happen there, and this white supremacist bar is almost like a cult kind of a thing, and so Patrick Stewart and everyone of the higher-ups involved decide we're going to keep them here, and then we're going to kill them all off and make it look like an accident or this, that, or the other. And it's just so intense. It's one of the few films I've seen in a while where the gore effects, the makeup effects for the gore, made me almost vomit. It upset my stomach and was so upsetting to look at and to see. It's an upsetting movie. It's not... It's kind of bleak, but it's not one of those horror thriller movies that ends where everything just sucks and you need to get over it. There is a hopeful ending, at least. Light spoilers again, but there's at least a hopeful ending that I can vibe with and get down with. The tension done in the film is just so top-notch. My only complaint with the movie is that sometimes characters fall into those kind of horror tropes where you go, oh, don't do that. No, you're talking to the screen, and it's not so much that you're invested in the character to the point where you're like, don't do that. It's more, Oh, come on. If you were in that situation, you wouldn't do that. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? You're an idiot. Some of the characters act a little dumb for me personally, or forget about certain things, and that puts their situation at a harder, like, it makes their situation even harder. And that's not even just for the main characters, it's for their antagonists as well. The antagonists sometimes are really dumb, which that might be some sort of political statement about how white supremacists are dumb, but I don't know. Some of that gets a little too much for me. Uh, they act a little too dumb, but otherwise, it is an excellent film. Surprisingly, for a film that is about a punk rock band, it doesn't really have a punk rock style, which is what I kind of find interesting. It's a much more, like, the opening shot and the opening bits of the movie are so kind of slow and meditative in a way that whenever they play, like, the hard rock or the hard punk rock that they play, it was like a punch in the face almost, because the rest of the movie just doesn't have that kind of a vibe, and creates this kind of interesting juxtaposition between the film language and the language that the characters are kind of speaking in. Not like a literal language, of course, but the artistic language that they're speaking in. And it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition that the film introduces. I liked Green Room a lot. It was definitely one of my favorites of this week. The next film that I'll be talking about is Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Now, some of you who are watching this might be like, why did you spend so little time on a Martin Scorsese film? Or why did you spend so little time on a Tarkovsky film for Killer Clowns from Outer Space? And the reason why is because Killer Clowns from Outer Space, I don't know why. I just want to talk about Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It's weird. It's a weird movie. It doesn't help that I was like half asleep while watching it, so there was almost this like nightmare lucid dream quality about it. Killer Clowns from Outer Space is not a film that takes itself seriously in the slightest. Not in the slightest. It knows it's ridiculous. It knows it's dumb. It knows that nothing it will do is going to be considered high art, or, you know, it knows it's a dumb 80s horror film, and there's something really charming about that. There is a charming quality about Killer Clowns from Outer Space that no matter how much of the like film nerd in me that looks at film as cinema and art, I can't bury how much fun I had with the movie. It's about the title says it all. I almost feel stupid for even having to explain what Killer Clowns from Outer Space is about. It's about you're following these characters from a small town, and they're all stereotypes or dumb or something. There's not any depth to any of the characters, but that's fine, because that's not what this movie is doing. It's not what its goal is. So you're following those characters, and there's a shooting star, and it lands, and this farmer with his dog goes to see where the shooting star landed, and then it's a carnival. It's a big tent top, the big top tent that you see in carnivals, and then the dog gets dog napped, and then so does the farmer. And then later on, these two teens who are making out on a mountain, or not a mountain, but one of those peak things, make out corner or whatever, they saw the shooting star and they go to explore it, and they find the big top, and they go inside of it, and it's like a weird They end up finding out this is like a weird spaceship thing, and then they find out that there are killer clowns. There are these horrific looking clowns. There's something equal parts horrifying and ridiculously goofy about these alien designs. They are stealing people and putting them into cotton candy cocoons. For some reason, we don't really ever learn. And that's the kind of movie it is. You don't learn about what the killer clown's motivations are. They're just kidnapping and putting them into cotton candy cocoons where they die and presumably get eaten by the clowns. And then there's these popcorn kernels that they can shoot out, and then those popcorn bits grow into like weird viney killer clowns for no reason. They don't explain that. Again, movie doesn't care, and you shouldn't care either. Just go on it. Just go on this adventure. Go on this ride. Okay? That's all you need to know. They're killer clowns from outer space. You knew what you were signing up for. You knew you were signing up for something stupid. So just accept it. One more thing I'll say about it is that it's got a kick-ass soundtrack. It's dated as all hell, both the film and the soundtrack, but it's great. It's good fun, just like the movie. In that opening theme with the shredding guitar version of like the da 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 da, it's like a riff on that. So catchy. I've known that song for longer than since long before I saw the film. That was kind of the first horror movie I watched this October, actually. I mean, you could consider something like Vampire or Green Room as like horror as well, but I don't know. This was much more kind of typical horror in a way. I had a good time with it. It's definitely not a good movie by any means, but it was a dumb, fun thing to just put on and experience. In terms of dumb fun, like slasher horror things, definitely not like on any scale towards like the Chucky films for me. I love the Chucky films. Maybe one day I'll talk about exclusively just the Chucky films, but not anytime soon. But yeah, that was a good time. I enjoyed it. The final movie I've got to talk about is Inside Llewyn Davis, and I don't even know how much I can talk about this movie because, again, what do I even have to say about it that hasn't necessarily been said before, or what kind of interpretation could I bring to it that someone else hasn't said? It's definitely more of an artistic movie than anything else that I really watched today. A little bit more... It's not like out there where nothing makes sense, but it is a bit more subversive in a way. It's a week in Llewyn Davis's life, and Oscar Isaac performs the songs. So does Justin Timberlake is in there, and so is Adam Driver cameos for like one scene, and John Goodman pops up for like a scene or two. I had no idea. It was like star after star after star, and I was like, okay. But Oscar Isaac performs like all the songs like himself, and I had no idea he could sing. He can sing really well, pretty much as well as he can act, which is really high up there. Oscar Isaac is one of my favorite actors. I love him to bits, and he does an amazing job in this movie. It's a Coen Brothers film, like Fargo that I watched last week. It's a Coen Brothers film, so it's got some of that dry wit to it. It's got some of that kind of darker wit to it in some bits. It's a very melancholic film, though, despite some really laugh out loud kind of funny moments, at least for me. It's a bit more melancholic, where I wouldn't really want to call it depressing, but I wouldn't call it happy either. And it's not like there's really any twist to the film at any point. It's just kind of a chill film to just watch, put on and watch and experience. You're not necessarily going to be on the edge of your seat at any point, but it's It's interesting. I like it a lot. Llewyn Davis himself is this perplexing oxymoron of a human being, and that makes him so interesting to watch. He's one of the most interesting like film characters for me that I've ever seen. He is an asshole, but he's also not an asshole. He does have his really good genuine moments with like he has a heart and he isn't a total asshole, and he even has the quality to look back on his assholishness and admit that he fucked up and that he is an asshole. But he never necessarily changes his behavior or his qualities. And some people might see that as like a negative, but it makes him such a unique character to watch. There's something about him that is very just enthralling, at least for me. There's something likable about him without him being a very typical protagonist. And I loved Inside Llewyn Davis. It was the 5 out of 5 that I gave this week. It was the only one this week, and I think even last week that I gave a 5 out of 5 to. No, last week I gave The Master a 5 out of 5. My bad. But yeah, it's the perfect it's the perfect movie that I watched this week, and I liked it the most of anything that I watched this weekend. And I don't know, I can't say enough good things about it, and I recommend it to everyone. I recommend it to everybody. Even if you end up hating it, I want you to watch it. Even if it doesn't sound like your thing, I want you to watch it. Give it a chance, because again, I really liked it a lot. That's the end. That's it for this week. I don't really have much else to talk about. Again, I didn't watch as many movies as last week, and I feel like I had a little bit more confidence, I guess, this episode, because I've already whipped out one episode, and hopefully the more I do it, the more confident I get, and the better I get at talking about the movies and how I feel about them. And, you know, that's what it is. It's a learning process. But that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like if you liked it, of course, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see what I'm watching next week. And also be sure to follow me on my Letterboxd, which will be in the description, where you can kind of keep up with what I'm watching before I do a video. Again, like, subscribe, comment if you've seen any of the movies. Do whatever you want. Thank you very much.